On today's episode of Building Be In, we have Harriett Steinbach in, and we're going to be talking about all of her wonderful work when it comes to entrepreneurship over at Illinois State University, our next door neighbors. And there's been, I think, a lot of momentum since probably, how long ago did you start in this position? Was it 2023?
December of 23.
23, there we go. Okay, so yeah, we're all heading in the right direction. We're learning from best practices. I think we've got a couple of field trips lined up to do even more, but it's really cool to see the momentum. I think it's on our side when it comes to entrepreneurship. But before we jump into that, I want to get to know a little bit more about you and how you ended up here in Bloomington Normal. So are you a townie, are you a transplant? Like, how'd you end up here?
I am a transplant, but I don't know how long that title lasts for
Hmm.
because I have been here since 2002.
Okay.
So I don't know if you when you hit a 20-year mark, there's sort of like a middle label for
Sure.
people. Um, so I am a lifelong Illinoisan. So I grew up in Rochester, which is one of the little
Oh,
towns outside of Springfield.
I know it.
And I went to Eureka College,
Okay.
which is also in central Illinois. I studied political science and history. And so, what do you do when you have a degree in political science from a liberal arts school where you have taken one class in the federal government, one class in state and local, one comparative government, one civil liberties, one constitutional law, right? You get this exposure to all parts of the discipline, but what do you do with that? You go to grad school.
Sure.
And so I came in 2002 to ISU. To go to grad school in the politics and government department, and so I studied political science with an emphasis in public service. So that's really those public administration components of political science. So working for the government, working for nonprofits, those kinds of things. So that's what I studied. At the same time, I was working for both in grad school and right after I finished my master's, I worked for some local nonprofits doing fundraising and PR. And then I started at ISU in 2006.
Okay.
So I have been there for 18 years now. Um, so I spent 10 years in the Dean of Students office and it had a few different roles there. But the theme through my career at ISU is definitely going to be the community facing roles. So in the work that I was doing in Dean of Students office, each of my roles, I always had some aspect of community engagement. In 2017, I moved to the Center for Civic Engagement. So that was when it was a brand new department. And as part of a reorganization of some existing civic engagement activities that were happening in the Dean of Students office, we moved over and we gladly moved. I always like to let people know it was an amicable divorce. We were glad to move over. And so I, for 7 years, served as the associate director in the Center for Civic Engagement. And that was an amazing experience. Building that department, working with the team, working in both the curricular and co-curricular and community spaces, getting to do electoral engagement. It was a really awesome experience. And so, as I mentioned, in December of 23, I moved to the Office of Research. So an opportunity presented itself to serve in my current role, which is Director of Innovation and Strategic Partnerships. And I took it. It was really exciting, as much as it was hard to say goodbye to civic engagement, and I will always love that work. I was really excited about the possibilities and new challenges, and the fact that this position that I have was also community facing. So one other thing I would add in my background is in the middle of all of that, in my time in civic engagement, I did go back to school, and I know you're living this life right now. I went to University of Illinois Springfield to get my doctorate in public administration. And so thank you, COVID, for saving me a year and a half of drives to Springfield.
Mm-hmm.
But my research was specifically on town-gown relations and really understanding the infrastructure that's necessary to have effective relationships. So for me, my current position meets a lot of personal interests, professional values in terms of being able to work with the university, work on behalf of the university, but engage our community.
Now I can definitely see the theme of town and gown across it all, and that's actually I'm taking change management right now, and they were talking about if you want something to last with an employee, it really has to line up with their personal values, and it sounds like all of these have
Yes.
across the board. Money's nice, but it has to align,
Yes.
and also you have to see your role within the entire structure of the firm or organization, so you can see that as you've progressed through. I got to go back to Rochester for a second because I'm trying to do the math on when you went to Eureka. My brother actually went to Rochester High School.
Oh my
But
gosh, I am putting it together right now. Mike Hoban.
Mike Hoban, it's my brother. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, we're the same age. We were in the same class.
There you go. Yep. Nope. Yep. Mike Hoban. That's my brother. Half brother, I would say. Yeah. And he's over there now, and I think he's a fireman over for the
Okay.
city of Springfield. Yep.
Wow. Oh
Small
my gosh.
world.
Such a small world always.
That's funny. I'm going to text him after this. But
Yeah,
besides that,
my maiden name was Sullivan.
okay.
I don't know if he'll remember me, but
I'll find out, but that's one unique personal fact is the fact that you went to high school with my brother Mike.
yes.
Over in, but what's another another personal fact about yourself?
Okay, so I've thought about this one because I know this is the one like that people really need to prepare for,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here, and I'm going to share something that's on my life goal list that I am about to accomplish in 2025. And some people have, like really impressive things like summiting, a certain mountain or like visiting all the continents. And mine is not that impressive, but it's been a personal goal for a long time. And thanks to Hulu, I will accomplish it. And that is watching every single episode of the original Law and Order series.
Holy cow! How many seasons is that?
That's 24 seasons.
Oh my god!
I started in December and I'm on season 16. So if you're doing the math, yes, I have watched a lot of episodes in single days. But in the winter, it's cold and I don't want to go outside and there's not a lot to do. So I have a deep love affair with the original, and I always had it in the back of my mind, like how fun would it be? I knew I had come pretty close because I've been watching it for a long time, and it's like TNT, the back in the day, right? TNT Law and Order Marathon Saturday, watch it 8 hours or something. But I thought maybe I need to make a list and start like checking, checking off which ones I've seen. And then Hulu released the whole thing, and so I started from the beginning. Even if there are many episodes I have seen before and seen multiple times, but I'm watching them all.
Yeah, that is definitely a unique personal fact about yourself. And then I'm sure afterwards, like you're gonna have to move on to what is it like SDU and there's so many.
You know what? I can't. This has been the biggest commitment that I think I've made other than completing my doctorate. So I think, and it's going to slow down this summer because it's like gardening and yard season, but I still believe I'm on track. By the end of December, I'll have finished.
Nice. You could do a dissertation on Law and Order then.
Oh, I actually have thought, I think you can appreciate this, like when you get to your research methods classes, and I'm a qualitative researcher. And so my takeaway when I took qualitative methods was that literally everything can be a study.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have thought about like, how could we analyze? And when you watch so much of something like in such short succession, you pick up on the themes naturally.
Yep.
And so, yeah, there could be a study out there for sure. Or there maybe already is, and I just haven't found it. I just haven't
do a meta-analysis on all the different Law and Orders.
Yes, exactly.
On the same hero's journey or the episodes. It kind of reminds me of Hallmark movies. It doesn't really matter, what the story is. It's the same story, just.
Yes. Yeah. There's about I'd say 10 max sort of major Law and Order tropes.
There you go.
And I'm getting really good at being able to name them pretty early into the episode. And
so you can solve the crime before it's over. Yeah, you have your own prediction model on how this is going to go.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. We need to partner up. Just call me when you finish your dissertation, and we can do a study.
Do a study on it. I'm not sure who's going to commission that, but yeah, it's maybe Hulu. Who knows? They're probably using AI in the background. All right, very cool. So we did talk about your role at the company already, or your organization at Illinois State University. Let's jump into the whole Bloomington Normal Innovation Hub concept. I know that you're a part of a couple of different organizations applying best practices. So how did this come to be? What is the history of the Innovation Hub?
Yeah, so this is driven by the Illinois Innovation Network, and that was started in 2019 under Governor Ronner. And it's really important to note that Governor Pritzker continued that when he took office in 2020. So there is bipartisan support for this concept, or there was. We are appreciative that Governor Pritzker put some funding behind it in 2020, which is when we saw a lot of activity take off. In unlike states like if you think of Wisconsin or Ohio, states that have their higher education is a system. So all of the state schools are connected. They're a network in some way, and Illinois doesn't have that. And so really some of that original vision was, how do we harness the power of our higher education institutions within our state? And so to do that requires creating some connections among those institutions. And so, you have Carbondale, Edwardsville, of course, they're connected, and you have the U of I system,
Mhm.
Chicago, Springfield, Urbana-Champaign, but then you have about 10 other schools that are out there independently. And so the original concept was, these are 4-year public universities, and there's 12 of them. So start with those and identify those as innovation hubs, and then create some mechanisms that create connections between those institutions, so that we can get folks talking and collaborating. And then then the idea is applied research for the economic benefit of the state of Illinois. And so we know all of our universities are doing research. And so how can we look at specifically at that applied research? So basic research being, we study whatever we want to study, and we learn from it. We publish that in the journal, and maybe we do a presentation at a professional conference. But applied research has this intention of being applied, of being utilized in a public space to solve a problem, to address an issue, to innovate. And so to do that, use that applied research to have an economic benefit for the state of Illinois. So it starts at the state level. Illinois State becomes one of the hubs. And I always like to say, we refer to ourselves as the Bloomington Normal Innovation Hub. That's really important to us because Heartland Community College has also been in this conversation since the beginning, since 2019. And so we don't want to say it's the ISU hub. That's sort of isolating language that because of Heartland, we're having some conversations with Wesleyan. Obviously, we talk a lot with EDC, the municipalities, that we see the work of our hub as representing, serving the entire community. So each hub was tasked in 2020 with sort of identifying a initiative, a project, that kind of thing related to the economic development in their community. And so our original idea was the exact word, something like community educational center, makerspace, and business incubator, something like that. And folks will know this, they will remember this and recall this because we were part of a plan for Uptown Circle, and that trails east, I believe.
Mhm.
And so food hall on the first floor, and I think one of the architectural firms, and so we were going to be the third floor. And we got very far in this planning process. We had our board of trustees had signed a 10-year lease. So we were really far in the planning process. And then the developer decided not to build that building. And so us and everyone else that had already signed leases and had plans was disappointed. And so that was in 2022 when that project stalled out.
Mhm.
And so then I think we kind of lost a little steam, that was disheartening, and had to figure out, like, what's our plan now? And so I was hired in December of 23. I started in December of 23. And part of my charge was revisit this business incubator plan. And so I have some other pieces in my job. One is related to corporate engagement, and that's specifically corporations or industry partners that have research needs and they're interested in connecting with the university, and vice versa. When we have faculty with maybe some technologies or unique research knowledge and talents. And so I am a relational person that helps match those two. So that's one part of my job. Another part of my job is sort of all things Illinois Innovation Network. So what's happening at the state level, is that getting down to my campus? Is that getting down to all of our stakeholders? Depending on what's going on, just promoting that, and then making sure our people are in those spaces. But then this third piece is now planning and developing this business incubator.
And that's where I think most people, when they think about entrepreneurship, it is some type of physical space, even though there's been a lot of work behind the scenes, just like going back to the education side. I find that in economic development, it really revolves around people don't know what they don't know and what tools that are out there. And entrepreneurship takes place in a lot of different forms. And we've got some really good entrepreneurship stories around here. I mean,
Yes.
State Farm, at one point,
Yes.
that was a startup, and so was Country, and so was Distill. And Distill's one which has got a really cool story. But yeah, even now, there's the SBDC over at Illinois Wesleyan. I know Illinois Wesleyan just broke ground on their Petrick Center, which is more of a maker space, which that is one of the components of a whole ecosystem. I know that I think we just got an invite today. He sent out about going and touring like what's going on over in Peoria. So there's different levels of entrepreneurship when it comes to infrastructure. And I know that you guys have been working, especially with the students, behind the scenes trying to find out, what they need. And of course, me being selfish, like I want them when they graduate to stick around here, which is why we're pushing for housing so hard, because, they're going to come up with some really cool ideas. And I know that at the last, it was like community leaders breakfast that you guys had over at ISU. And you presented some stories about some of your students and what they've done. It's been amazing. It's like, that's where I want that ecosystem here so that we can retain them. I'm not going to steal your thunder on the story, but the fact that he did want to stay here, like that's awesome. So how do we get more of that? I guess, what are next steps? How can we help?
Yeah. So what we're doing is, really what I jumped into was a strategic plan, which I know is not the most exciting thing for people to
I
want
love
to, but for me, I love it, right? It's not everyone loves it, but I love it. And I also coming from a community-centric place, I needed to really hear from the community. What do you need and what do you want? Because if we had made a plan that didn't meet the needs of community, then it wasn't going to be successful. And the original planning, absolutely, they had. I went back through. I read all of the focus groups with small business owners. Some of the data we had though was pre-COVID, and it was we're just in such a different environment now. So we really started from the beginning with our strategic planning team, and last summer, we did focus groups at ISU and with lots of community stakeholders. We drafted our plan, then we sent it back out for a survey to get reactions. And so lots of thought and care went into making sure this plan was what it needed to be. And so the thing that we heard the most was the desire for some kind of central coordinating agency. It's not as if we have nothing happening here, right? You just mentioned a bunch of stuff that is happening. We have a lot of good stuff happening, but it's a little bit in isolation. And so that was an important detail for me that we brought into our plan, that we will absolutely not duplicate anything, because that is ridiculous. That is just a poor use of resources. So it's not about us, and it's not about what we want to do or the glory of the work that we're doing, but it's about where are the gaps and how can we strengthen the connections of the existing programs and services, and then how can we fill in the gaps? And you're absolutely right that you don't need a physical space to do many of those things. And it's my desire that by mid-26, we will start our programming. even without a physical space. But ultimately, we are working towards a physical space, and the determinations of the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity on my grant application is a very important detail that I'm waiting on, and supposedly by the end of this month I will know. But ultimately, we do want to have that physical space because we do believe in those organic collisions. And actually, I was just reading this morning, I think it was, I'm mixing up if it was like Forbes or Wall Street Journal or something, but they had an article about serendipity. Which actually made me think about Doug Cruitt, who is the executive director of Distillery Labs in Peoria. And he always talks about curated serendipity. And so, and that's what we're going for, is when you create a space where you can bring folks together, both in, through different kinds of programming and intentional topics and themes, but also, through these organic opportunities to connect just because we are in a space together, then really great stuff can happen. And I absolutely believe in that. And most of my career has been that. I mean, I spent 7 years in civic engagement where my job was to get nonprofit organizations and faculty together and help to design those partnerships. And most of my work was really just getting people in the room together, because then it just took off. Mm-hmm. And so once we have our physical space, I think that'll be that final piece. But in the meantime, what we're doing is all of those behind the scenes things, like all of the, we've got our plan and we know what we need to accomplish in 2025. And then I'm doing building a website, getting all of that stuff in order, as well as our hub. So we have the broader Bloomington Normal Hub, Innovation Hub. So we're going to have an advisory board for that group. But then within the hub, we have the business incubator. And of course, launching that's going to be a lot of work. So we have an implementation team that we're designing right now. So a little bit at the mercy of those academic calendars, even though we have lots of non-academic folks that we're going to invite to be in those groups. We do also have ISU, Wesleyan, and Heartland folks. And so we will wait until the fall to really have those groups kick off on their work. So just planning for now.
Strategic plans and planning. So I do find it exciting that you guys have that out there. And I know that entrepreneurship has been on and off of our strategic plan, depending on, the capacity and really just the energy of, what we can do and what we think is attainable. But you're right, like having one single contact for the fractured, I shouldn't even say fractured because people are communicating, but it's just a little bit here and there instead of one just overarching ecosystem that everyone's aware of. And honestly, when I got here, workforce was the same way. I mean, economic development was the same way and still is a little bit now. I mean, I know that as we're recording this, the city and the town are out in Vegas, doing retail recruitment. And so people are always asking, like, what's the difference between you and the city and the town? It's like, well, they do retail, we do non-retail. So trying to understand where everybody's at. And then you, as a startup, what help do you need? And then getting in touch with the right person for those curated serendipitous moments that you're trying to align. And that's, we get a lot of that. Actually, I'll just get random texts like, hey, so-and-so's thinking about starting this, who should I put them in touch with? And it depends on where they're at on what they could qualify for. Is it just an idea? Do they have a product? Are they looking for a physical space? Because that's where we can step in. So it really just depends. And so I'm really excited about having a facility, especially, and I know the theme for Illinois State's version is that, I could go in with a concept and I could, maybe partner with some students and I can create a business. Whereas Wesleyan's, as great as it is more geared towards the students. This one could be at the northern end of what we'd like to see, this innovation corridor between the two universities, and eventually expand out so that it's more of an innovation triangle between Champaign, us, Peoria, shoot down to Springfield. You can cover them all. And there's a lot of really cool pieces. And I think that, like you mentioned, Distillery Labs earlier, and also a big nod to Champaign on that massive research park that they've got. But that said, I just got back from Select USA in DC. We're trying to recruit businesses. And if you think about how we as a region stack up compared to other areas of the United States, because people talk about, lower taxing climates, in Texas, or heck, Alaska's got the lowest taxes in the nation, but people aren't doing business there.
Yeah.
It's more than that. You get what you pay for. And I think our university system, as you mentioned, in Illinois is one of the best there is. And so to have so much of that talent right here in Central Illinois, I think we're sitting on a gold mine. It's just a
Yes.
matter of getting it organized. And I think that's what you're up to.
Yes.
So,
Yes, that's exactly it. And, folks talk about, U of I or Urbana Champaign a lot, and they are amazing. They are the gold standard. And they also started doing this 20 years ago. So they have a 20-year lead on us. I absolutely admire Distillery Labs in Peoria. Absolutely admire Innovate Springfield. That's associated with UIS down in Springfield. And I'm really excited to, Bloomington Normal, we're a little bit behind those communities. They were, Peoria's been planning distillery in some iteration for 8 years. Innovate Springfield, I think, just had its 10-year anniversary, started as a nonprofit. It's an independent nonprofit, and then eventually merged in with the university. And so for me, it's also seeing that gap. That does have the potential for long-term ramifications if we don't fill the gap. And that has to do with keeping people in our community. It has to do with a diverse and robust economy. And so, for example, one of the things I'm most excited about, I never thought I would say this in my life, I'm really excited about wet labs. And for those who don't know, so wet labs basically like a science lab. But you need to have, you can't just turn any room into a wet lab, right? You need certain kinds of plumbing and electricity, venting, things like that. So that if we're going to plug in a giant industrial refrigerator because it's going to house some seed specimens or something, right, that we're not going to short circuit everything, or all of those things, we need all this kind of infrastructure in a building. And so, I'm very committed to having wet labs in our business incubator. And that, of course, it's going to make the project more expensive. But there are no wet labs between Champaign and Peoria. And I felt like there's an interest. There's an interest and there's a need. Not that long ago, we had someone from Illinois Wesleyan emailing us saying, "Hey, do you have any lab space available for rent?" They've got a student that's ready to be independent. And we had to say, no, we don't. Not at this time. But in a couple of years, we will. And so I think it's, recognizing that we did have some gaps that we have the opportunity to fill that will contribute to the long-term health of our community in a few different ways.
No, I agree. And it's about diversification. It's like I try to explain economic development industry that you have. You want it to be like your stock portfolio, so you're not over reliant on one industry or another. Any chance that Wesleyan was in the bio waste?
Yeah, I think so. And so
we gave them a grant. Yeah.
Yep.
So they're still here, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It would have been nice to have that transition place before they graduated to that. So it's like, yeah, you're right. There's different phases for a business, and we've got some pieces, but it's not smooth.
Yes.
Not as smooth as we want it to be.
And we want to be able to see that sort of escalation of business development process and meet folks, where they are, right? Because I love the small business development center that's at Wesleyan. But if you're only at the ideation stage, right? If you have never put a single thing down on paper, all it is an idea in your head and you just want to talk about it with someone, you're not ready for the SBDC yet.
Right.
And that's why they have said, we're excited about the business incubator because then we will have a place to send people that aren't ready for us. And then similarly, right, we will have this lab space, or I can say to people, like we always know the EDC has, you have your storefront grant, and I can say, now that you have incubated here and you're ready to have public face, or you need more physical space. Okay, now let's connect with the EDC to get you access to those funds.
And then there's also people that they're sitting on a gold mine and they need an accelerator to get them to the next level. And there's that service doesn't really exist either. And it's like you can help them with the business plan, make modifications. We can even run financial analysis and models for them, which we've done for some, to say, hey, if you make some tweaks here, you can probably get a loan and expand, your footprint. But it's having somebody else doing that, so we're
Mhm.
not in the space of advisors much on that front as we're with site selection. But it's plenty of work to do. But yeah, glad that you guys are working on this, and glad that we are getting some wins and the students are wanting to stay. And if we can use this as a transition to go into like, besides being like, yes, this is a great place to do business, if you wanted somebody to stay here or you're recruiting somebody in, like, where are you going to take them around town? You've got one day, any season. Like, what's the route? What's the fam tour? How are you showcasing
Sure.
Bloomington Normal?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I have listened to nearly all of your podcasts. And so I love hearing what people have to say. And I don't know that I have anything unique. I would say, well, I know when I have like personal, like friends or family coming to visit for a couple of days, Uptown Normal. So, like, let's do some shopping. Let's eat at Medici. Um, I also think Constitution Trail, I think it is like the greatest treasure of our community. And it's like how many miles throughout McLean County?
It's massive and it's growing still.
I think that is awesome. Um, Downtown Bloomington, potentially for some shopping, some of my favorite restaurants. If I was going to do lunch at Medici, then I'd go downtown Bloomington for dinner. And we honestly could make it like a progressive dinner between like Anjou, Epiphany, Rosie's, I have
Mhm.
loved forever. Mystic Kitchen, Reality Bites, I have loved forever. I think those are some, I think, shining stars in our community. But I also love Miller Park. I think whenever I'm out there, I'm like, wow, this is such an amazing place. Like, look how big this park is, and it's so beautiful. And there's the bridge, and you can fish, all the kids' activities, and the amphitheater, um, and so, maybe that doesn't answer your question of, if I'm recruiting businesses, but
I'll say a business, just
that's
like if you're trying to get a student to stay, it's just like, because I know we've interviewed students and the students always talk about things that we should have, like a farmer's market, which I was just at this weekend, and it was
yes,
crazy. Good
I'm
place to
sure.
see babies and dogs. It's like they're all over the place. But getting those students, if you want them to stick around and start a business, where
Yeah.
would you take them? But yeah, you kind of covered both ends of the innovation corridor for food. So it's kind of like showing people like maybe what they don't know.
I also think, while I personally am not like super into the music scene, I am so impressed. Right. So I don't take advantage of those activities in this community as much as others do, but I notice them. And I'm so impressed that, between Normal Live and Uptown Circle, stuff in downtown Bloomington on the square in the summer, the castle, BCPA,
Hmm.
honestly, the arena. Like, I do think that we have like a burgeoning music scene. And so if you really like music, or that's just a space you want to be in the summer when it's nice out, like there's a lot to do. And I think sometimes students are isolated from those experiences because their circle is small, right? Even
Hmm.
if they live off campus, it's oftentimes walking distance, and so their sense of what to do in Bloomington Normal is a little bit limited to what's in the Illinois State University like 5 mile radius.
Right.
And so I think it's really fun to get to like help inform students of all these other opportunities that are, beyond the immediate ISU area.
Beyond the bubble. And that's
Mhm.
it's kind of funny you mentioned the BCPA because we usually check who's playing at the BCPA before we go like downtown. Because if you go before the show, good luck getting into a place. Because we go to the Brass Pig a lot, especially for trivia. There's trivia all over town.
Yes.
And yeah, we were there the other day. I was like, what is going on? I was like, oh, there's a show at the BCPA. Because like right before the show, the whole place cleared out
Yep.
and left us trivia nerds to our own devices. But yeah, no, you're right. Music is getting really big around here, and we're huge music buffs, so we love it. Is there one item though? I know you mentioned Rosie's and some other restaurants. Like one thing that you say while you're here, you have to eat this.
Man,
You have to go to.
that's a good question. Um, so I used to do a lot of volunteer work with the Bloomington Normal Japanese Sister Cities Commission.
Mm,
And so we have hosted, I was on the committee, so I got to, host lots of folks, lots of guests, sometimes kids, or, junior high and high school kids, sometimes adults. And we've hosted folks in our home. And so on those free nights, we take people, different places. And I usually pick Reality Bites.
Okay.
Because you can order lots of different things. So I can get lots of different stuff and we can all share. And so it's like increases your exposure to like local Bloomington Normal and American cuisine. Although I'm not going to lie, because I've listened to your podcast, there was a point in which I was kind of like binging this podcast. And then
Just to find food.
I had to go to Anjou Above and have a farm to face roll.
Oh yeah.
Because I don't know, you could do some analytics on what food has been mentioned on this podcast.
Yeah.
And then you could have Courtney do like some kind of top 5 thing.
Yep.
But I was hearing it so much. I was like, that the farm to face is really good. I think I'm going to need to go there soon.
Yeah, that's still a go-to. Anytime that we go to Anjou, it's like that and the steam buns. We usually get some type of a takeout. Anjou is a go-to for our family for sure. And then this one should be an easy tee up for you since it's a part of what you do, but why does economic development matter?
It matters because it means you care for your community. When we can show care by investing in our communities.
Yep. No, that's really good because it is, well, it's sad to say if you're not seeing the investment in communities, does that mean that people don't care in other communities? Because I've been on both sides. I've seen it, whenever we teach this, that's why we say it's a flywheel. It goes both ways. You can invest and see the return. And there's places that are disinvested. So that's when you lose a business. And that is so disheartening when somebody closes. So you want to create that environment where people are constantly investing. And I can't think of a better way, especially where, we're not landlocked. We got room to grow. But right now, construction is a challenge. So if it's a challenge to get more houses and get more buildings, then we need to work on the startups that are smaller. So even us going to Select USA and DC to try to bring in foreign direct investors, I'm not actually interested in bringing in the big whale companies that most people would. I'd rather bring in some like you got 5 employees, you want to get going and find a soft landing spot in the U.S. We're good. We've got space for you. But some of these that are like 5,000 jobs, I don't know how we would support that. So I think that the startup culture is going to be in high demand as we continue to ramp up the economic development flywheel. But is there anything else that you want to cover while I've got you on?
Well, I think we need to at least talk for a minute about like the funding piece of entrepreneurship.
Oh, sure.
And that is, I'd say that's the biggest gap in our community. And so and that's not something we will play a role in, but that's going to take everyone to make
that's
that.
That's education. Yeah.
And so that, bringing, I think the EDC is providing great leadership in this area of talking about reigniting an investor network. I think looking at things like what does, venture investing look like for the companies in our community? And then, like we had this great conversation with Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, probably a month ago. So we learn about all of their funding opportunities. Some that are, they've got their new venture initiative, but the Illinois Innovation Voucher, which I was familiar with, but is a great example for companies, right? Because for that one, you have to have a higher ed partner to access those funds. It's a little bit more on the R&D side. But that's very exciting for me to think about partnering with a small business to help use our faculty and student talent to meet some of their needs. But then that gets them access to some capital. And so there are these pockets of funding, or these different kinds of funding. And so really being able to identify those, put those together. I think, some things coming with the EDC and its entrepreneurship committee around this funding topic are really important, because I would say that is the greatest need we have related to entrepreneurship right now.
And I think that's one of the reasons that ended up being on the strategic plan this year, and is going to be the focus for our next Being by the Numbers, which will be all in entrepreneurship. But like after that meeting that we had with DCO, having somebody like that come in and explain, here's what we got going now. Here are the tools that are available. And maybe even just bring in entrepreneurship to tell their story and what they need help with. And then as we market it, maybe we're marketing it like, hey, if you have disposable income and you're looking to invest or to become
Yes.
an angel investor, here's your opportunity. So ideally, we get a survey out, find out what they're looking for, maybe meet some of those needs, and then present it at the next Being by the Numbers and recruit in more investors. Because I know there's disposable income in this community. It's
Yes.
just getting them, again, lining up what you said, those collisions, make those collisions happen between, a younger startup that's like, hey, we're here and we can be so much more with the right funding, and then blending that with some traditional financing, we get them to take the next step.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks for coming on. As I mentioned, we'll hopefully get this thing sliced and diced and up on Thursday as a preview, and then Friday for sure. And
Okay.
then we'll be looking.
And
Do you have a website yet, or
yeah,
anywhere they can
well, I don't
go?
have a website, but I do have a link to our strategic plan.
Okay,
So
perfect.
I'll send it to you because I know sometimes you do whatever, like liner notes or whatever you
Yep,
call
it's in
them.
the show notes.
That's it.
Yep.
So I'll send you the link right now because I would love if you would put that in the show notes. So if folks want to know more, I mean, they can dig into 20 pages of what we want to do. So thank you
Awesome.
so much, Patrick. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's half of this, like that we do the podcast is to tell the rest of the story because, I got to listen to you speak at ISU's breakfast, but not the rest of the community. So this
Right.
is our way to push this out and then hopefully get more people to get interested in entrepreneurship and just share what opportunities will be available and, do a big event at Being by the Numbers and just keep spreading the word.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.